for not letting us run out of hope, love, and peace, but always giving us more than enough of what we need. Amen. Okay, wait a second. It's gonna be a little bit. There we go. Okay. Okay, Elijah and the widow. Elijah was a prophet. God helped him show and tell others about God. One day, God said, "Pack your things, Elijah. It's time to move to a new town. I have told a widow there to feed you. I will make a miracle." It was not a good time to move. Rain had not fallen for many days. The sun was hot and the earth was dry. Elijah didn't have any friends in the new town, but he listened to God and went to the new town. When Elijah finally got to the town, he was thirsty. Just then he spotted a woman. Could this be the widow God told him about? "Excuse me, ma'am. Could you please bring me a drink of water?" The kind woman hurried to get water. Grrr, Elijah's tummy growled. He remembered that God said the widow would feed him. He called after her, "Excuse me, ma'am. Could you please bring me a nibble of bread to eat?" The woman stopped in her tracks. She turned to face Elijah. The widow had sad eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have any bread. The last of my oil and flour will only make a biscuit. My son and I are going to split it as a last meal. We have no other food." She started to cry. "Dry your tears," Elijah said. "God will make a miracle for you. Bake the bread and share it with me. God promises that your flour and oil will not run out." The widow mixed, kneaded, and baked loaf after loaf of bread. Her jar of flour and her jug of oil made plenty of food for Elijah, herself, and her son. God's promise was kept. It was a miracle. There we go.
All right, as I mentioned on the way in today, you guys received a bag, and you put some food in there. You put a granola bar in there. You put some water in there, and we call these blessing bags. We're in November now, which is the month of giving, and so we're going to be thinking about ways that we can be giving, especially to people in need. And we've gotten you started on your blessing bag, but I want you to take those bags home with you and think about other things you might put in them that people might need. At times, Pastor Sarah and I have kept granola bars, just a big box of granola bars in our car. Sometimes we kept bottles of water in our car because often when you see people in need, you are in your car. And by having something handy, you can give to people when you see people in need. And it's a good thing we can do and remember as people who follow Jesus that that's one of the ways that we can show God's love to the world is by helping people who are in need. And today we're going to talk a little bit more about people in need. Have you ever encountered someone in need before? There's a good chance you have. Maybe you've been in your car, maybe you've been somewhere else, maybe you've been at a place like a shelter or a hospital where people have been in need. And you can think about all the different things that people have needed. Sometimes people need food, sometimes water, sometimes shelter, sometimes people need money for things, sometimes people need gas or medicine or maybe just a friend. There's not one way to be in need. But the problem is that I think sometimes we get a little scared when we see people in need. And because sometimes when we see people we don't know, it can seem scary to us. And we think that if people don't have money or food or a place to live, that must be their own fault. Or somehow they've messed up and that's why I have food and they don't have food. But one thing we can remember is that when we see people in need, it's not that usually that they have messed up in some way. They're usually people just like you and me. And that they need love and they need food and they need clothes and they need friends. They need all the things that you and I need. And so when we see people in need, they're really not all that scary. And it's our job to help them. And that's what happened in the story today we heard about Elijah. Elijah was a prophet from God, and he met a widow. Does everyone know what a widow is? A widow is a woman whose husband had died. And normally, if you were that time, and even today, if you were a widow and your husband had died, what happens? You usually expect other people to take care of you, or to at least help out. Maybe other people from the town would help out, or friends, or family, or neighbors. Normally, if you suffer a loss like that, you're counting on someone else to help out. But for this widow that Elijah met, that didn't happen. And she was on her own, and her son were in need because they had nothing to eat. And Elijah meets them and says, "Can I have a bite of food?" And the widow says, "All I have is this last bite," but she gives it to Elijah anyway. And then God does a miracle. And I want to talk just a minute about this miracle, because sometimes we think the miracles are these big gestures of God. And what happens is Elijah says, "Because you've shared with me, your food will never run out." And it didn't. The widow always had food from there on out. And when we talk about a miracle like that, sometimes we think that Elijah just prayed and all of a sudden there was an empty jar and boom, it was full, and that it was always that way. And that might be what happened. We don't know. But here's what I like to think happened. I like to think that the whole people of the town saw Elijah spending time with that widow, and the widow giving to Elijah. And from that day on, everyone in the town pitched in to make sure that widow had enough to eat. And that was the miracle that happened that day, is that from then on out, she was a part of the community, and she was always giving, and everyone was always giving. And that's where you and me come in. Because I think when we see people who are hungry or thirsty or in need, sometimes we can pray for them, and that is always a good thing to pray. Or we can say, "God, can you have a miracle to end hunger?" And I think God would say, "You are the miracle." When we feed people who are hungry, we are the miracle. When we give out blessing bags to people in need, we are the miracle. When we commit ourselves to caring for people in need, we are the miracle of God. We can help that blessing never run out. And that's what I want to encourage you to do today as you go on, whenever you're in your car, whenever you see people in need. I want you to think, how can I be God's miracle for that person? How can I show God's love? How can I be like that community that rallied around that widow so she was never in need again? Because that is ways that we will show God's love to the whole world. If you are in faith development, one of the things you'll get in your bags this week is a box of bread mix, which you can use to give to people who are in need or people who you love. It's a way to practice giving and a way to practice generosity, so we hope you'll do that. I'm going to teach you a song right now. You can stay in your cars for this one because it's getting a little cold and windy. And this song is about God providing food. It's a fun and silly song called the Papaya Song. And it goes like this. I'm going to sing, "I like bananas." And when I sing "I like bananas," you all go, "Woo!" Let's practice. "I like bananas." Woo! Next I'm going to sing, "I think that mangoes are sweet." And then I'm going to sing "I like papayas." And when I sing "I like papayas," you all are going to go, "Papayas?" That's right, like Pastor Sarah. You're really loud. So let's practice. "I like bananas."
Woo!
"I think that mangoes are sweet." "I like papayas."
Papayas?
"But nothing can beat that sweet love of God." Nothing can beat that sweet love of God. Let's try the chorus together. "I like bananas."
Woo!
"I think that mangoes are sweet." "I like papayas."
Papayas?
"But nothing can beat that sweet love of God." Good job. The chorus goes like this. I'll sing it and then we'll try it together. "Walking round in circles, 100 miles an hour, trying to find my way back to that heavenly power. The world tasted sweet and then it turned sour. Then I turned around and received God's power." Now here's the fun part. We go, I, 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 woo! So a lot of I's in there, and you can do I like this when we do I, and then we go back to bananas. So we're going to start with bananas, then go to the next part, and we'll sing it a couple times. Ready? I like bananas. Woo! I think that mangoes are sweet. I like papayas. Papayas, but nothing can be that sweet love of God. Walking round in circles. Walking round in circles, 100 miles an hour. Trying to find my way back to that heavenly power. The world tasted sweet, and then it turned sour. And then I turned around and received God's power. I like bananas. Woo! I think that mangoes are sweet. I like papayas. Papayas, but nothing can beat that sweet love of God. Walking round in circles. Walking round in circles, 100 miles an hour. Trying to find my way back to that heavenly power. The world tasted sweet, and then it turned sour. And then I turned around and received God's power. One more time, I like bananas. Woo! I think that mangoes are sweet. I like papayas. Papayas, but nothing can be that sweet love of God. Thanks for singing this morning.